Very good morning to you once again if you're just joining us. South African Airways is in business rescue due to, among other issues, corruption, tenderpreneurship, gross mismanagement and the constant interference by politicians, some CEOs at least, or at least one CEO, perhaps we should be more direct, has made this allegation. This is in response from the SAA Pilots Association to allegations made against it by the Public Enterprises Director General, that's Kgathaso Tlhakudi. Now, Tlhakudi claims that the regulating agreement signed with SAA in the 1980s is a reflection of, quote-unquote, apartheid heydays, when there were no opportunities for black pilots. Well, the Director General, Kgathaso Tlhakudi, joins me in studio now to respond to some of these issues. Maybe let's go straight to the very hot topic, DG, this morning, that is even the subject of some front page newspaper headlines. Race slurs in SAA pilots row. This is in the front page of the Citizen newspaper. What exactly did you say to elicit this?
Yeah, good morning and thank you very much for having me on the show. What we have done, we have said to SAPA that we must arrive in an agreement when it comes to the benefits that the pilots will get that will ensure that we have a sustainable and profitable SAA going forward. The agreement the RA entered into 1988 shall not ensure a sustainable airline going forward. And we have said to them, we need to renegotiate that. And secondly, we have said to them that the terms which they are proposing for the termination of this agreement are not acceptable. We have limited funds that we are having to operate with to ensure the restructuring of SAA. If we are to accede to their demands, we will not have enough capital to ensure that SAA is restructured. Yeah. And secondly, other employees within the organization have accepted these new terms because they understand that for the airline to survive, there are sacrifices that must be made. But SAPA has refused to play ball on this one.
The basis of their refusal to play ball on this, as you say, DG, the bone of their contention is simply that why should they be the only section of workers within SAA that are told they are only going to receive 50% of their salaries when they receive their retrenchments as per the business rescue plan, when other employees are going to be given their full salaries at retrenchment point? Why should the pilots be the only ones who bear the brunt?
Well, the way the voluntary severance packages were structured was to ensure that the people at the lower end of the earning scales at SAA benefit the most, and that those at the higher end obviously make bigger sacrifices. And it's within that line of thought that these were concluded. In any case, if you look at what the pilots have extracted out of SAA over the years, they've been fairly compensated, more than fairly compensated. By the way, on exorbitant.
Let's speak monetary terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me interrupt you there. Let's speak monetary, because I like dealing very simplistically when it comes to these issues. I read somewhere that the pilots, I suppose, should we say the majority, that are represented by this union, SAPA, the South African Airways Pilots Association, they earn 2.7 million. Is that annual income or is that per month?
That is basically the cash packages without benefits. And I've also quoted a figure of 3.6 million rands for this minimum amongst the senior pilots. I mean, those salaries, when you look at them, they cannot be justified. Granted that these are very critical skills required for any airline to be able to operate. And they do not compare with the local airlines, for instance, and some of the international airlines. What the pilots through the RA had been able to engineer is a system where the benchmarking for their salaries are compared with some of the top airlines around the world in terms of earnings. And they conducted this survey themselves. And this is a product of 1988, where literally privilege was being entrenched through legal agreements. And it's really unfortunate that over the years, the board and executive leadership at SAA have not vigorously addressed this particular point. And of course, we have had arguments being made to say that this is not the only reason why SAA it is where it is. It is correct. That's not the only reason. And those have been well articulated. And my minister on various forums has indicated the damage that was done at our state-owned airlines, at our state-owned entities due to state capture.
Yeah.
But we cannot not address some of these fundamental reasons for the damage that has been done at our airlines. And some of them is very exorbitant salary packages that were enhanced with employees at these entities. We must address that.
All right. So as we move on from this specific topic of pilots' salaries, is there, though, a negotiation that is currently taking place with the union concerned over this particular issue? In other words, the 50% that is being proposed by business rescue practitioners that the pilots take away as part of the retrenchment process, will the rest of the 50% be given to them at some stage? Is there at least that guarantee?
Well, I'm not that close to those negotiations. The VRPs and the HR department at SAA are leading those discussions. What we have said, obviously, as the funder of the restructuring process, is that we must do this in a prudent and in a responsible manner, such that we at least give this airline a chance to get up in the air again. We have limited funds. We have 10.5 billion rands that has been made immediately available. Over the next 3 years, another 3.5 billion rands that will be made available. We are reliant on an SEP, the strategic equity partner, that will be coming in to provide the rest of the capital that is required. And it will not make an attractive proposition to have the terms that the pilots are proposing through SAPA to be part of the new airline, also this RA, to survive this restructuring process. So we're trying to give this airline a fair chance at flying again, because it's such a critical component of our economic system.
And we're going to come back to another critical point concerning the airlines. But, DG, all things considered now, the business rescue process, it was meant to have ended on the 31st of March.
Yeah.
There is an administrative glitch. I just want to ask very quickly, is there a realistic chance that a new airline will be born? Yes, there is. How can you be so confident?
I'm confident because I think we need this airline as a country. We have seen that without SAA, that even repatriation of vaccines have been very much compromised. We are an end-of-the-world destination. We need those connections to ensure that investments and also tourism, which is a critical component of our economy, continue to thrive going forward. There is the actions of the small group of pilots will not sabotage that bigger project. All the other unions at SAA have agreed to the new terms in terms of getting the airline up and running. There's a really very major components of our stakeholder communities that want SAA to get up and running again. There's been very positive feedback that we have received with the cargo flights that we operated with SAA across the continent. When people saw this airline appearing on their screens as it flies from one traffic zone to the other, that is the amount of goodwill that will ensure this is a success. And SAPA should know that this will carry us through. And really we are appealing to them to be magnanimous and to accept the fact that they have benefited quite greatly from this airline over the years. The least that they can do at this stage is to ensure that it gets given another lifeline. But we'll succeed nonetheless.
A date, or should I say a deadline, has been missed for the business rescue plan to conclude. Clearly, there has to be a new date. What's the timeline?
Well, we are within days of concluding the exit of the business rescue practitioners. There has been, a few, I'll say, operational issues that had to be finalized, including having a sense of, the asset base, the state of the asset base, and the state of operational activities at SAA. We have met at the end of last week with the business rescue practitioners, and there will be further meetings today to ensure that we find each other on that one. But I'll say we have reached consensus, and one of the critical points that the board had to put in place, obviously, the interim executive team.
Yeah.
So we're hoping within a day or two that they will come out to say who will be leading the airline going forward, but that some of the appointments have already been made.
Really? So you're saying that this is going to be within days, not weeks, that the BRPs wrap up their work?
Exactly. So that is our expectations, and I think we are almost there. We just need to reach consensus on one more report, and I think to a large extent we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This administrative glitch that meant that the 31st of March deadline unfortunately had to be pushed back. Are you at liberty to tell us what exactly it is? Could it involve the SAA Pilots Association, or is it something completely different?
Yeah. Look, the Labour Relations Act is still in effect even during the business rescue process. So when the business rescue practitioners exit, the board and the executive team will take over that responsibility going forward of wrapping up on the labour relations matters. As I said earlier, what we needed to reach an understanding on is what are we taking back from the BRPs. And that's the negotiation, or rather discussions that we've been having, and that's the reports that they've been preparing. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, and they have given us, on Thursday we received the first iteration of that report from them. The team worked through it over the weekend, and we'll be meeting with them again to at least to ensure that we are aligned in terms of what we are getting back from them. Yeah.
Well, you had it first here on Newzroom Afrika. That's the DG of Public Enterprises. We're not letting him go. He's not going anywhere just yet. We're simply taking a short breather. When we return, 8 billion rand down the line with the business rescue process having been taken and used, is there more money that taxpayers should expect to fork out for this airline, this new restructured airline, to go to the skies? We'll have that question answered by the DG in just a moment. Very good morning to you if you're just joining us. We are in conversation with the Director General of the Department of Public Enterprises, Mr. Kgathaso Tlhakudi. DG, before we went on a break, the simple question is around whether taxpayers should expect to fork out more money for this new restructured airline to take to the skies. And the reason I'm asking that is that there is something that's called a notice of substantial implementation, and SAA being discharged from the business rescue plan. That substantial implementation notice will have to be implemented. Does it come with more money that we have to push out to SAA over and above what has already been given to them?
The cost of restructure of SAA was articulated in the business rescue plan. That is 14 billion rands over 3 years. And we indicated in there that 10.5 billion rands will be required almost immediately. That's what has been advanced to SAA now. There's about 2.7 billion rands of the 10.5 that still needs to flow. That is to the subsidiaries of SAA. The 3.5 billion rands that has to flow over the next 3 years is to take care of the concurrent creditors, as well as to take care of the unflown ticket liability, that those passengers that would have booked their flights and paid upfront and didn't get to fly. And of course, it's our hope that those passengers will choose to fly again with SAA, so the money will not flow out of SAA. So that's the total cost. And we have committed that government and the South African public will not be putting more money into SAA. We have said that we'll be getting a strategic equity partner in that must provide the capital to finance the airline to a break-even point, which will be over the next 3 years. So that's
is there real, genuine hope that a strategic equity partner is possibly waiting in the wings? Because as things wrap up in the business rescue process, surely that business rescue partners should already be spoken to by, I guess, the shareholder.
Yeah, those engagements have been ongoing. We have had a short list of entities that we have engaged, and they have shown good interest. And one of the critical requirements is that they have to show the capacity to be able to put in the much-needed equity into SAA.
Give us a name, DG.
Well, unfortunately, I cannot divulge this. These discussions are held on a confidential basis. But we are quite hopeful that we'll have a good product at the end.
So, but by the time this new airline takes to the skies, that strategic equity partner would already be part of this new airline. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what we would hope to achieve. But the realities of it is that this process tends to take quite some time. There are due diligences that have to be undertaken now, and obviously there are negotiations after that to conclude the share sale agreement. But one of the operations that we want to get going as quickly as possible is the cargo flights. SAA is required to provide much-needed support and national effort to ensure we get vaccines here, and that South Africans are inoculated. So those are some of the first operations that we are hoping to get going. We are unable to do so, by the way.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was about to come to.
Because the pilots...
they're striking.
They are striking, and of course, they're in control of the training department at SAA, and they have not played ball in terms of ensuring that we're able to train those pilots that have said they are available to help us out. And that's an area which the board and the new executive team must address to ensure that this airline is run properly and is not serving narrow interests.
So DG, you realize now then that you truly are in an awkward position. These pilots that are represented by the SAA Pilots Association, that's the union that they belong to, 89%, they represent 89% of the pilots at SAA. So they're not some small group, as you said earlier. They actually have some muscle to really hold things back. Now, here's what I want to come to. There is something that is called the SAA's Air Operating Certificate. And what this simply means is that these are the management pilots and instructors, as you've just said, who are now part and parcel of this strike. Now, this Air Operating Certificate is in jeopardy if these pilots continue being on strike, and that means that you will be unable to fly these cargo flights to go and fetch vaccines from wherever if this strike continues. How do you resolve the strike?
We have almost 60 pilots, by the way, that have broken away from SAPA. And some of those pilots were responsible for the preparation of vaccines from Brussels. So there are pilots that are available that want to fly. There are obviously administrative processes that must be undertaken, including the retraining of the pilots to ensure that they are current. That must be undertaken. We'll mobilize all our energies and all our efforts to ensure that we break this particular deadlock, and we'll do so within the law. And I can tell you those plans are underway to ensure that we are able to ensure that these pilots that are willing to fly for SAA to ensure the national effort are retrained and made current. We'll overcome this, and really the pilot SAPA should not underestimate the will that we have to ensure that this is achieved, because this is a national asset. It cannot be held to ransom to narrow interests. SAA, the airline, was composed of 4,600 before we started retrenching. The total group is 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So does this mean now that the 170 pilots now hold the rest of those people and their new futures to ransom? We cannot allow that.
Unfortunately, they do, DG, because they constitute a grouping that could either fly the airline or make sure that the airline remains grounded. Now, my next question to you...
Can I comment on that, Colin? Okay. We have indicated that this agreement, even on legal grounds, is on very shaky ground. And we are definitely prepared to go that particular route to ensure that these agreements, if it needs to be, is tested by our courts. And we are hoping that as the board and the new executive leadership comes in, that this will be one of the first tasks that we'll undertake to ensure that we do not continue to be held at gunpoint by this relic of the past, of the apartheid era, the RA.
And you repeat those words. DG, I guess what you are telling us indirectly is that you're willing for this matter to be resolved in the courts if needs be, if the airlines remain, or rather the pilots remain intransigent.
Exactly.
Sure. When we talk about this new restructured airline, as per the business rescue plan, and still on the topic of pilots, there's about 700 pilots at SAA. Now, I want to assume that the majority of these pilots belong to SAPA, which is on strike. That's the union we're talking about. As part of this new restructured airline, you only plan to keep 88
that is correct.
Of these pilots. Now, the retort from Grant Beck, who represents these striking pilots, he says, well, if that's the case, the concern is that these pilots, the 88, have only flown for 1 year, some of them, and many are going to need retraining and further training. That's a concern, is it not?
Well, and that's what we're seeking to do now during this particular period, to ensure the training does happen. And that training has been sabotaged. They've gone as far as to drag the CAA into this by saying that the exemptions that were obtained to enable the Brussels flight were flawed, which is not correct. So Grant needs to be open and honest with South Africans. What is he doing on his part to ensure that whichever the 88 will eventually be, that they are granted an opportunity to be able to update their skills? We have even gone further in the business rescue plan. We have said we'll provide additional, in fact, we've done 1,000. So it will be an additional 88 pilots that the airline will ensure that they remain current, so that as the airline grows, that we are able to pull those back into the airline. So that's what we have done. So he needs to state to South Africans what is it that he has done to ensure that the pilots retain their currency. And so far, he has done everything in his power to ensure that is not achieved. Even on the issue of the 88 that will remain, they've said last in, first out, which means all the black pilots that came in literally at the back end of this transformation process that has been undertaken since 1994 will be the first ones to be chopped out. That's one of some of the positions that he has undertaken on this. So, and clearly, this is a bigger discussion as well. In 1994, when we said we are going to form a new society based on new norms and new values, that was not just the responsibility of government. It's the responsibility of all of us. Now, formations like SAPA, which currently represent overwhelmingly white pilots, they need to ask themselves, what have they done to ensure that transformation happen? We talk about inclusivity, we talk about social cohesion. What have they contributed to this? Instead, it has always been about how much more can they extract on top of the privileges that came with apartheid out of this airline. And that is some of the bigger discussions that we must have, because we're not seeing it only at SAA, we are seeing it across the board. We are seeing it, if you read the reports from the Commission on Employment Equity, you find similar utterances going across to say, instead of making progress towards transforming this society, ensuring everyone gets a fair opportunity, we are actually regressing. So we are saying here at SAA, we shall not allow that.
DG, moving on very quickly. I am out of time, but I've got to put these last two questions to you. The first one I want to put to you is, who is going to lead this new airline? I know there's an interim board, but who is the new CEO?
I'll let the board announce that. I think it's only fair and proper that they do so.
But a person has indeed been appointed?
No one has. They have not been appointed, but there is a consensus between ourselves and the board on who the person is going to be. So we have a name, if that's what you're asking.
Well, that's breaking news. There is a name for the new SAA CEO. All right. Then finally, DG, SAA and Eskom have enjoyed, and I forget the description now that I was looking at in one of the articles, but they basically have had the lion's share of government bailouts. The one entity which possibly could go the way of a business rescue is Denel. They posted, what, 1.9 billion in losses last year. Is that entity going in the way of a business rescue, or are you going to shut it down? Well,
the board has proposed a new strategy which aims to protect the core business of Denel and basically sell off other peripheral assets at Denel to ensure that it's able to recapitalize itself and be sustainable going forward. It will be a much smaller Denel than what we have now, but it's important that Denel continues to survive because it's such a critical component of the rest of the defense industry in this country, and we have proven to be quite a competitive supplier of weapon systems across the world. And as a country, the capabilities of our South African National Defense Force is very much dependent on the equipment that is supplied by Denel. So Denel might survive, I think, based on our experience with...
Might or must survive?
Must survive. Must survive. It's not only our decision at DPE, of course. It's the decision that the rest of government must make.
So that means they're in line for a bailout?
No, not a bailout. I've said that...
The restructuring plan will probably require some money.
Yeah, I've indicated that they have indicated that they have peripheral assets that they can be able to dispose of to fund their own restructure, which is great. Of course, the rest of government will have to help with regard to the interim period. And I just want to make a distinction. A distinction is that a bailout is when you continue to fund operational losses, the entity, which is not what you have done with SAA, which is not what you are doing with Eskom. You have provided the funding to ensure that they restructure themselves to become operationally sustainable businesses going forward. So that's the mode we are in. We are not going to be funding operational losses at these entities. They must come up with sustainable business plans, and that will be the basis for government to fund them going forward. Thank you.
Director General at the Department of Public Enterprises, Kgathaso Tlhakudi. Thank you, sir, for making time to come and talk to us.
It's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thanks indeed. And good luck on this SAA Pilots Association situation. It really is a worrying situation financially.